was exhibited on street corners. And a commandeered military bus, with its dejected troops still inside, toured the city, with captured guns on display. The students were being meticulous about dealing with the weapons.
We wanted to tell the truth to the people, to the citizens, and we wanted to send the weapon to the government. The weapon was the army men threw the weapon on the ground, and the students collected the weapons, and we wanted to send the weapons back to the government.
More weapons and equipment accusingly laid out in front of the gate to the party leader's compound. A move by the guards to prevent us taking pictures brought a furious response from the crowd. In the square, the mood was also electric. A suspected informer was given rough treatment and hauled off to the police. The government's action in trying to send in the troops and failing this time has precipitated an unprecedented and ever more complicated situation. Kate Adey, BBC News, Peking.
That was how it was last night. Tonight, the troops came back firing. Just before we came on air, I got hold of Kate Adey on the phone. She told me of the demonstrators killed in front of her and of the crowds cheering Western journalists, urging them to tell the world what was happening.
When I got to the children's hospital, where a lot of the emergency casualties were taken, people were in a state of appalling shock. They could not believe what had happened. They rushed up to us, showing us wounds they had, showing us the people who were being brought in, and shaking their heads and screaming with disbelief and anger. And on the streets for the next 3 to 4 hours, we were in the crowds which were screaming, yelling abuse at the troops, regardless of the fact that they were being fired straight at. They were shouting at them, "You're fascists. You are killing us. Stop killing." And they have gone on that way. They are so defiant. They are enormously determined. In the last hour, things have calmed down a bit, but even so, there are still shouts coming from the street below where I am, which is about 500 yards from the edge of the square.
What was it like for you on the streets tonight?
As a foreign television news crew, and specifically from the BBC World Service is much listened to here, and a lot of people know who we are. Every time we came near them, they cheered and yelled, and they gave their "B for Victory" sign. We had to quieten them down in order that we didn't become targets and we didn't draw fire. We kept telling them to be quiet. They rushed up to us and they were saying again and again, "The world must know. Tell the world what is happening."
A lot of this violence seemed to be happening very close to you.
It was all around us. We, on several occasions, were flat on the ground as the bullets were coming over. The soldiers were firing indiscriminately. We were on 3 or 4 occasions in the side street leading to the main road past the square. And soldiers, as they were being driven past in trucks, were firing from the trucks down the streets as they passed the end of the street. And then in the main street, some time ago, there was an enormous volley of shots in which we were caught. And 3 people died around me, 1 man in front of me. And there's gunfire now. I can still hear it going. About half a mile away, an enormous volley, which is going on just over the next street. And from the square as well, I can hear it now. More gunfire, again and again.
So there's still fighting, but do you think from what you have seen tonight that after all this violence, that the demonstration, the protest will have been crushed?
Who can tell? I'm hearing gunfire now, just over the next buildings, and this is 5 hours after it started, and there are still people on the street below. They are not going home. They're standing around in groups, they're cycling up and down, they're clustered around, and there's still a large crowd opposite the line of troops who guard the entrance to the square. It is impossible to tell how people here will take this. They have been so surprised, so outraged by what has happened, that it is unprecedented.
Kate, thanks very much. Take care. And now today's other news. The Soviet ambassador to London, Leonid Zamyatin, has accused the British Secret Service of bugging the homes and offices of his diplomats. He said listening devices had been discovered at the Soviet trade mission in North London and in flats used by Soviet personnel. The allegations have been denied by the Foreign Office.
The Soviet ambassador delivered his formal protest in a 10-minute meeting he demanded with Sir Patrick Wright, the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office. A short time later, reporters were given detailed descriptions of eavesdropping equipment discovered during maintenance work at the Soviet trade mission in London, and also in the private apartments of Russian diplomats. Some listening devices that had allegedly been discovered in the concrete structure were put back in place and removed again for the benefit of watching journalists. There were claims that the use of high-powered radio emissions in the equipment was harmful to the health not only of Soviet personnel, but also that of British people living locally. The Foreign Office says it's sure that any such bugging was not the work of British agents. The Russians don't believe that and say Anglo-Soviet relations are bound to suffer.
It makes worse our relations, you know. After the long talks between the Prime Minister and President Gorbachev, when they can discuss everything, you know, no one mentioned from the British side that there are some people who are in Great Britain who is against the British law, you know, activities, etc., etc. You know, it means that we don't trust each other.
Officials would not say whether President Gorbachev had raised the issue with Mrs. Thatcher during his visit to London in April, but they confirmed that he is fully aware of all the discoveries. That both countries do engage in espionage against each other is taken for granted, and the Soviet decision to make such a well-planned attack today has taken the Foreign Office completely by surprise. They think the Russians are still smarting from last month's round of expulsions, and they can't deny that relations which just 2 months ago were very warm have now become badly damaged.
Meanwhile, the BBC correspondent Jeremy Harris, prepared to leave Moscow this afternoon, expelled as part of the Soviet Union's response to expulsions from this country. With him were a British military attaché, Major Nicholas Shakespeare, and the Sunday Times journalist Angus Roxburgh. When Jeremy Harris arrived at London's Heathrow Airport this evening with his wife and 2 children, he was still expressing the futility of the so-called tit-for-tat expulsions.
It can't possibly serve Soviet policy or the Soviet image in the world. It's bound to be counterproductive, and there must be more civilized and rational ways of sorting out problems between governments than involving innocent journalists who are providing, I hope, a decent service to the public.
Here, the Welfare Association for Rottweiler Dogs says it's been inundated with calls from worried owners who want to get rid of their dogs because of the recent spate of attacks. A baby boy mauled by a Rottweiler yesterday is in a stable condition in a Birmingham hospital.
At least 6 people have been attacked by Rottweilers in the past week, and now owners concerned at the breed's image want to get rid of their dogs.
A gentleman phoned that had had a dog for 5 years, but had never given him any problems, never had anything untoward gone on with him, but because of all the publicity and all the upset with the breed, he feels that dog has now just got to go.
The government has rejected calls for a national registration scheme, but admit that existing legislation relating to dangerous dogs needs to be highlighted.
Anyone who's worried about a dog can report it to the police, who could take it to a magistrate and have it controlled or destroyed. That's an important piece of legislation. The Home Secretary has said he's reviewing it, but people need to know and understand about it.
With less than a fortnight to the Euro elections, Neil Kinnock has stepped up his campaign against the Conservatives. At a socialist rally in Paris, he accused Tory leaders of taking Britain into isolationism, whereas Labour realised the need for a strong social dimension to Europe.
There are Conservatives who understand that. There are other Conservatives who do not want to understand that. You may have some in France. We certainly have some in Britain. They turn inward. They try to hide in isolationism.
And the main news again. The latest reports suggest as many as 55 Chinese demonstrators, perhaps more, have been killed in clashes with troops in central Peking. A sheer massacre was how one journalist described it. Hundreds more, perhaps more than 1,000, have been injured. Students and workers chanted "fascists" and "leave us alone" as soldiers fired directly at them. tanks are tonight reported to have moved into Tiananmen Square. There'll be a special news report on BBC1 tomorrow morning at 9:30. Meantime, from the newsroom tonight, good night.
On the record tomorrow, if you're grey, be glad. We report on the growing power of our ageing population, a revolution for the over 50s, and a Tory uprising in Ulster that embarrasses the government and the Conservatives would like to suppress. Then, as the Democrats slump even lower in the polls, we ask Paddy Ashdown, what other way is there than down and out? That's On the Record tomorrow at 1 o'clock on BBC1.
Good evening to you. It looks like it's staying chilly and rather unsettled, I think, in the next few days. Mind you, it wasn't as unsettled here as it was over many parts of Europe. Even the Mediterranean had some rain today, and some quite heavy rain and thunderstorms in those eastern areas of Europe. Hardly surprising it's unsettled, a large area of low pressure. That's not going to go very far, and it'll continue to feed these cool northerly winds down across the British Isles. The chart for the middle of tomorrow, very similar as you see. Now, at the moment, or rather a couple of hours ago, we still had a few showers scattered around across the southern part of the country. They're going to linger for a while, more particularly in the southeastern area there, perhaps lingering even right through till morning. But with the skies clearing further north, it's going to be another one of those cold nights. There will be some ground frost around, and temperatures in the air getting down to quite low levels, 3 or 4 degrees. That's the upper 30s Fahrenheit. But with some cloud beginning to spread into western Scotland, holding their temperatures up, and indeed western Scotland tomorrow rather a cloudy day. Maybe the odd spot of rain around as well. Southeastern parts of England, perhaps a bit of cloud and still those light showers to begin with. But I think during the course of the day, what's going to happen is it'll brighten up there. And it's going to be quite a bright picture, really, for most parts. There'll be some sunshine, but we will have that cloud bubbling up again, just as it has done the last few days. And some showers breaking out. One or two rather heavy showers, perhaps in the southeastern corner. And again, as you can see, on the cool side.
18 months ago this week, violence broke out on the streets of Gaza. Everyman tomorrow evening reports from the Israeli-occupied territories to look at life under occupation with the people who live and work there, the Palestinians and the Israeli soldiers, and talks to the British-trained relief surgeon Dr. Sui Chiang.
You fight and you go to war with someone who is an equal. You occupy someone whom you despise. And that is very difficult for many people to understand unless they live under occupation.
Everyman at 10:10 tomorrow on BBC1.
Over on BBC2 in about 20 minutes, there are highlights from today's third-round British Masters golf tournament from the beautiful Duke's Course in Woburn. Here on 1, the highlights are from today's big match from Wembley as England play Poland in the World Cup qualifying match.
Sunday night on BBC1 and at 6:40, Baldunicans Homeward Bound. That's followed at 7:15 by comedy in 3 Up, 2 Down.
How dare you doodle at me in public?
At 7:45, a rough guess in All Creatures Great and Small.
He said you could send samples off to a Labrador.
To a what? At 8:40, the last semi-final of Mastermind with Magnus Magnusson? Correct. That's Live at 9:25 continues its investigation into the private boarding school in Berkshire, where the pupils have been sexually abused. And Everyman at 10:10 tells the story of the people who live and work under the Israeli occupation. At 11, a very odd couple.
She loves you. Oh, yeah. The last time she was here, didn't she bring you a present?
Yeah, a can of room freshener.
And at 11:25, the Big E examines the quality of one of our most precious resources, water. And with the Sky at Night and Network East, these are programmes for Sunday on 1.
On BBC2 in just under 10 minutes, Depeche Mode and their fans travel across America on their world tour, which culminates in the 101st concert at the Rose Bowl Stadium, Pasadena. Here on 1, a tale of espionage and intrigue goes frighteningly wrong in the Looking Glass War.